everyone. Thank you for having me. As you just heard, I'm going to be talking to you in this session about how to create content to make an impact. And it doesn't matter how big or small of an impact, and no matter what job you're in or what you do. And so before I get started, I just want to take a quick minute to just share with you what I mean behind this title so that I just set your expectations. So when I talk about impact, it means impacting something that matters to you. Now, this could mean changing your own situation, like changing jobs or even careers. It could be impacting, starting a business or partnering with someone, or just connecting with people who are interested in the same things as you. Or it could mean impacting something that matters to you but isn't really about you. So this could be things like fundraising for a cause. It could be impacting a local community, or finding an answer to questions that you've never could, and then sharing it with others so they could answer their own struggles. And the thing is, with content, you can do that because you can just, what I mean by this is you can just show up organically on a platform that fits you and who you are as a person and your character and personality. And so that's what we're going to be going over. I have just over 30 minutes here, and so I have broken them down into 5 parts of content creation: the why, the examples to get you inspired, the reasons or excuses you may be using to not creating content just yet, steps that are super easy to get started creating content, and then just some ways to keep going if you feel a little bit unmotivated or uninspired. And so the first one I'm going to be covering is the why. And this is probably the most important one, because if we don't get this one right, it won't really matter anything else, because you won't know why you're doing things. And so let's set the scene, right? Picture your typical morning when you are just going to work or driving your kids to school, or whatever your first interaction with the outside world is. Your path might be looking something like this, where you just see a bunch of signs and billboards and just things that are kind of like in your way as they are. You could also turn on a radio in your car and listen to a radio show or ads or everything that gets kind of put on there. And then you might open Facebook later on your phone or any social media. You might be listening to a podcast, or maybe reading an email from someone that you like and that you subscribe to. And so by this point, even though you maybe don't really realize it, you've been exposed to dozens, maybe hundreds of pieces of content, and it's kind of a daily thing. It just happens. And yes, some of those are just store signs and billboards and things on our way, and others may have taken hours or days to be created and produced and recorded. And no matter what they are on that scale, one thing is true. There's this big truth about it, and that is that someone had to create them in order to just come in front of us, for us to be aware that they exist. And so if they hadn't created it, we wouldn't know of them. And so we get to the answer number 1 of the 3 answers of the why of content, and that is because without content, you don't really have an online identity. And that's a big deal, because if none of these people have created nothing, and the store signs and the podcasts and whatever, you really wouldn't know they existed. It would just be blank spaces instead of where they were. And so it's what they have used to get on our radar. It's kind of, I like to call content the way that people create their ID in public, and that goes for print content, like real life content, as well as online. And if there was nothing they created, as I said, we wouldn't know of them, probably. And however, between these two, the road signs and billboards, and then the content that we saw on our phones, or laptops, there is a big difference, and that is the ones that existed on the road and on TV and radio and things that we are kind of used to. They're created usually by businesses who have just been there by default. It's what we've always known. It's what we've known 50 years ago. It's what we know today. And they have just taken space they were given, especially the physical ones, the stores and window shops and things like that. They just got that as their real estate. And so they use that to advertise to us and to message to us since forever. And then the flip side to that is the phone and laptops and internet things that we've seen, which is someone had to create that. And it's not usually businesses behind it, it's people. And people that we know, whose names we know. And so the thing about it is that they have, they know that they can carve out a platform. It wasn't a default for them. They had to know, oh yeah, if I can record a podcast or show up on social media, people will actually want to see me if they relate to that. And so I've plotted out all of these different types of content on it's not a grid, on these fields, green and orange. And so if you look at them separately, the orange one is the content that we are used to seeing. They're from, as I said, from established businesses. We know that if people have money, they can usually find us through these ways. If you don't have money, you won't be putting, mailbox flyers, and you won't have big billboards on squares and, alongside of the road. And it's kind of like they have deserved our attention without really asking us for it, and so it's just kind of there, and we don't really care about it often. Oftentimes, we just kind of are indifferent to it. Let's flip to the other side, where we have the green parts, which is social media and blog posts and videos and all sorts of formats online, where it is solely based on how we feel that we choose to interact with this. We actually go out of our way to subscribe, to follow someone, to put them on in our environment by following or subscribing. And they have done this because they know that they don't need a budget, they just need to resonate. And so I think this is really, really good news, because that means you can show up there too. And it is a really liberating feeling, I think, because that means that we are not stopped by not having money. And you don't need a PR team, you don't need a budget, you don't need an editor, you don't need to hire anybody for the most part. You just need to use your laptop or your smartphone. It has camera, it has notes app, a microphone, an internet connection. We have this platform that is a privilege to be on because we just have it, and it by default gives us access to other people. And I really like this example. I came across it just a couple of weeks ago. This is a post on LinkedIn from Tim Solo, who is the CMO of Ahrefs, which is marketing software. And he said, isn't it crazy how many people you can reach today if you have a camera and an internet connection, which I think is pretty cool. He talks about how they got 100,000 subscribers on YouTube as a company just because they created video. And I think just you need a keyboard. You don't even need a camera if you're not a camera person, and that's pretty cool. Answer number 2 to the why is because to create an impact, you don't need to be super popular. You don't need to have millions or billions or whatever of views or subscribers. You really don't. You need the right set of eyes, not all of the eyes. And so here's a little bit of a story. When I tell people what I do, and especially if they're not in tech or in marketing, they often ask me, do you make things go viral? Is that what it is? And I say, no, it's not. And sometimes they ask me to make their YouTube or Instagram viral, which is a whole different conversation. And so I don't really blame them. Like this is a whole thing where social media, like this is the Google Trends graph for go viral term. And so around 2010, it kind of just like exploded. I have no idea what happened there. But basically, virality of content is something that is very praised. And I don't blame the people who ask me this because it's just a normal thing. We see these, famous kids on TikTok and YouTube and all of these places. It's wild. And so my answer is, I'm not here to tell you how to go viral. If you're here for that, sorry. And I don't know how to do that. And most people don't. They really don't. It's kind of like a mix of creativity and momentum and emotion that goes into that. And it's not a science. And even if it were, I really, really don't think it will matter. And here's why. A couple of years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was at a job I really didn't, I wasn't happy at, and I wanted to change it. And so my idea of changing it was if I fix my LinkedIn profile, it's going to be a lot easier for me to get found by, cool companies that I want to work with. And at some point, I came across this super inspiring tip, and it stayed with me forever, and I'm going to share it with you. I wish I knew who to credit it to. Someone said, just one profile view can change your whole life, your whole career. And that's the profile view that you can see in your LinkedIn analytics. And that was a big deal, because all of a sudden, it wasn't about getting 100 profile views. It was about getting the right one, just one. And so if we take this to the context of content, it really means it just takes one right set of eyes to see your content, not a million of them. And just one person could make a whole difference. And that difference, as I said in the very beginning, it can be something of your own. So if you want to change a job, it means they could hire you. If you want to fundraise, it means they could give you a lot of money. And maybe you have a question that you were never, ever able to answer. And now all of a sudden, someone found you through your content, and now they get to answer your question. And so that's what I mean when I say a difference. And the opportunities are really, really limitless. Like anything you can imagine can happen because of content. But the thing is, you have to create, and then you have to keep creating. And if you create just once, it's great, but seeing that there's about 5 million blog posts a day, which is not encouraging, it's really hard to stand out. But I'm not asking you to outnumber the 5 million. You never will. Nobody will. But it's not going to help you to get discovered if you stop at one. And so what I recommend is to keep going, because you're going to create a net, which means that someone is going to run into that net, meaning they're going to find one thing that they liked, and then they're going to see another one, and then they're going to share it with the person they care about. And what happens is they start amplifying everything you have created up to that point, which I think is really powerful, because that's what I mean when I say just run one set of eyes, not a million. And then we get to this really cool story that I found very recently. And this is from a newsletter from a guy called David Perel. He teaches writing online. I'm not his student, but I follow him, his content, and I'm on his newsletter. And so he talks about Nick, who I believe is his student. And Nick has transformed his career, according to David's words, by publishing 162 weekly blog posts for that many weeks in a row, which I think is about a year and a half. And he changed that's 3 years. But in a year and a half, he transformed his career. And so I got very curious, and I looked Nick up. And so this is Nick's profile on his employer's website, where he says that Michael Batnick was one of his first 20 Twitter followers, which I believe is the person who hired him. And what I want you to take from that is that he created a Twitter account and a blog from scratch. Someone followed it very early, and this person kept seeing a very diligent work from this person. And he said, hey, I want to hire him. That's, I want him for my company. I don't want anyone else to have him. And that's pretty magic. And so there's one other benefit, I think, to being super consistent, and that is when you create a lot of content, like a lot of it, then your work looks like this. And that is, you get to say, I'm going to send you 10 articles, best articles of all time that everybody has liked, and it's been the most popular thing ever. Because if you want to create 5 things, then you don't get to say this. But if you created 100, sure, it works. This is from David Perel's sign-up form at perel.com. And so that's what it is. When you say you have 10 best articles, it means you've created a lot more than just 10. And that speaks a lot to your work ethic, which I think it's pretty great. And then we get to the third answer to the why, which is a very simple one, and that is, once you start, there's a lot less resistance. And so when you first want to get started, you feel like you feel imposter syndrome, you're a bit paralyzed, there's so much you could do, so much you can write about, but once you start publishing, you figure out the steps, you know exactly what to do, over time, of course. You also figure out your writing process and things you can kind of tweak and improve and do faster and better. And then you start getting feedback, which I think is really powerful, because then you see the people that you're actually impacting, and that's pretty great. And then there is something called the writing loop, which basically means you generate ideas, you write, you publish, people see it, they feed you back their thoughts and give you more ideas. And so now you've created this machine of constantly creating content that you know that people are going to just love and resonate with. All right, so my second out of the 5 parts is the examples. And I've already mentioned a couple, the Nick Majuli example especially, but I want to cover 2 or 3 that I just want to show you what's possible if you actually get started. So my first example is Seth Godin. Does anybody know who he is or has heard of him? Can I just have a show of hands? Okay, so about a third of the room. So he's really well known in marketing circles, but also in business circles in the internet world. And he's been around for decades. And so if you would look at his like Wikipedia or his, his most well-known accomplishments, this is about right what you would see. He's written a lot of books, a lot of which have been a bestseller. He has also been in a lot of these like award things, which have started back in 2009 when blogging wasn't really yet a thing. And he also has a really high-priced, very well-respected program for marketers. And if you look at this, and then you look at his career before 2009, you would say, of course, but he was a Yahoo executive in the 90s, and he started a couple of companies, and for sure those connections meant something, right? Like that's what got him this. But I don't think it did, probably partially, but I think it's this. In 2019, which was 6 months ago, he published a blog post where he said that he has been publishing 11 years daily. Every day. He said there is a little bit of leeway with time zones, but basically he has shown up every single day for over a decade. This is, I think, about 4,000 posts. I might be wrong, I'm sorry. And he has shown up daily, and people more often will talk about this rather than the impact that it's made because they know him for this. But he's still creating every day because he still wants to make an impact. That's pretty great. My second example, Marie Forleo, she is this like businesswoman really well known in the online marketing world, especially with beginners who just want to start a business. And I was really intimidated the first time I saw her website. This was 4 or 5 years ago as well. And here's why. She is pretty great. She has been praised by people like Oprah and Richard Branson and has worked with them. She is a philanthropist, donates crazy amounts of money to all sorts of great causes. She also runs a really popular program, and she has written a best-selling book. And so you look at this, and at the time, I would look at her website and think to myself, well, of course, look at her. She has all of this wealth, and she's really popular, really well-known. Of course she does all this. Like, I would too if I had that. But the truth is, she started from nothing. I have looked her up. I've researched everything she's done, and she had nothing. I mean, you can look at her post back in 2008 or 9. She had no audience. She still showed up. And she, to this point, has created, up to, I think, about just over 500 articles, almost 500 videos, 53 million views on them. And she still keeps doing it. Now she has, obviously, a high-production studio. But she, it took her 10 years to get to this point. And so take that as you will, but she has built her own path. Third example is me. I was really hesitant to put this in because it's really weird because I'm not talking about my business here. I want you to show that you don't need to be Seth Godin. You don't need to be Marie Forleo. You don't need to donate hundreds of thousands of dollars if that's not your thing. But you can make a change wherever you are and start wherever you are. And here's why. This right here is my very short-lived blog that I ran when I was in college. I was in journalism college, and one of our projects was to run a blog because, we had to have this skill of writing online and publishing online. And so this was mine. It was about running because I love running. And it has 10 blog posts, 10, okay? That's just one semester of work. And I didn't really think much of it. I just created it because it was a thing we had to do. And here's what happened. Nike Plus Run Club, which is a thing all over the world, came to Croatia and hired an agency. And this agency found me through that blog, which had only 10 posts and still has. I cannot log into it. Like, I literally don't have a login. It's been so long. But they hired me. And I was working with them for a good while. It was one of the best experiences I had as a runner. And I'm 100% sure it wouldn't have happened if I didn't create that. They just wouldn't find me. That's just what it is. They would find someone else. And Instagram wasn't a thing at the time as well, so I think that's an important part. And so I want to encourage you to find examples that inspire you. So you don't need to look at these big names, and you don't need to look for you don't need to find this huge, massive thing and start with that. Start wherever you are. And I want to just encourage you to do one thing for yourself, and that is look at people that you follow online that you admire, and then you look at their work and you say, oh, wow, look at what they're built, or look at their audience or their impact or reach or whatever it is. I like to do this a lot with Twitter, with Instagram, with podcast episodes, blog posts, whatever it is. I like to look at where these people have started. And so sometimes I go to YouTube and flip you know how you can flip the order of videos from oldest to newest? I do that. It's really funny because people have been really like making poor videos 10 years ago, but yet here they are and have like, you know, millions of whatever you want to have of. And so I think that's a really good thing to do if you have your own, you know, unique people in your industry or whatever you do that inspire you. So third part is some excuses that you may be using. If you find yourself feeling resistance, I think you might be using some of these. So first, I don't want you to feel guilty. I'm not like blaming you. I've used all of these too. I'm coming from a place of love because I want you to, next time you hear these examples or excuses in your head, you can just go, no, it doesn't have to be this way. I want you to feel empowered. So first one is, I'm not a good writer. Anyone ever here said that? Like you wanted to say, you know, write a tweet or whatever, and you just said, oh, I'm not a good writer. Of course, because you think that you should be born with that. And so here's my take on that. Say you're at a friend's party or something, and someone says, I'm not a good pilot. They just come, you know, they're just a person there, and they're like, I'm not a good pilot. You probably would react with one of the following questions. Why do you think that? That's a really big one. Like, why would someone think they're a bad pilot? Have you had an accident? Like, that's a big deal. Maybe they're scared. Have you spoken to your instructor, like to someone who, you know, is been doing that for longer than you? And then a big one. How long have you been practicing? How often? Whatever. Let's take this to a non-work environment. So I'm a runner, so this is a relevant one and close to my heart. If someone says they're not a good runner, you probably go, why? First thing you do, why? And then you go, are you injured? Are you not fast enough? Have you tried, you know, joining a club? Have you spoken to a coach? Have you asked runners for tips? Have you been to a physio? And then a big one, have you been running? Have you been training? You know, the usual, because you want to know what's going on. But then someone comes and says, I'm not a good writer. You know what we do? Mostly, I kind of sometimes do too, but I promise I'd stop. We go, I don't know what to say. Like, I know how you feel. We say things like, oh, imagine if you could write as good as J.K. Rowling or Hemingway or whoever. We just kind of enable it. And so we really kind of tend to believe that we can be good writers without actually writing. And so these are my tip. This is not my tip, but this is the tip I have for you, which is from a good friend of mine in the marketing business, Kaylee. She says that the only really way to get better is to just keep doing it, even if you're not publishing it, which I think you should, but if you don't, at least do it just for yourself. It's going to help you. Excuse number 2 is you have nothing interesting to say. No one's going to find it interesting. Have you been to the internet recently? Everyone has something to say, and everyone has weird interests and whatever. So I don't think this is valid. And I think this comes from a place where we don't think we're expert enough, and we can't say anything better than somebody else. You know, everything we want to talk about, why would we really do that? And so whenever I think that, I do this. I go and type in something that reflects a need from someone. And so this is steps to making A. And then you have a song, movie, paper plane, a law, pretty cool, slime, decision, kilt, website, app, cake. If you know how to explain how to do any of these things, it means there's something you can write about. Same goes for this one, how can I be? And then you have all of these. I'm not sure you can help someone be rich or taller, but everything else probably, sure. And then how can I get better at? And you'll notice there is writing and typing and all the things we've mentioned so far. As well as chess and basketball and Fortnite. Like, that's so cool. That's so cool that we get to teach people that kind of stuff. So I encourage you to, whenever you feel this, just to take time to look through Google and search for anything related to things that you care about, and then look at recommended searches. It really works well. It's a good place to start. I can get hundreds of readers or followers. This is a big one because I think it comes from the viral talk that we had earlier, which, you know, you don't really need to talk to everybody. You just need to talk to the right people. And so when you do, then they help you reach more of the right people, which is pretty great because you kind of carve your own community. And so I think that a lot of people think that content is this. You just go into a room and shout in a microphone or a megaphone. and you get everyone to listen to you all at once. But no, oftentimes people don't like the guy with the megaphone. He's sometimes annoying. And so you can be this guy who is just like this cool person that comes to a party and talks to everyone and brings a positive attitude and makes friends with everyone. And that's what content does, because you can do that at scale. You can do that while you're sleeping because you've created something for the world. And you just get to be nice to somebody else about something that they and you care about. And so if you ever think to yourself, oh, I've written this thing and only 15 people have read it or whatever, think that you take these 15 people into a room and talk to them like individually to every one of them. That's what content does. And I think you would feel a lot more empowered if you imagine them as people you talk to directly. Everyone else got their success faster is a big one because we think that overnight success is a thing. I don't think it is. Overnight success is often just like a decade of work that we haven't seen before someone became successful and famous and whatever. And so this is an article from Gary Vaynerchuk, who is a really well-known online entrepreneur. But he basically talks about when he worked with his parents' company, and he created something called Wine Library TV, where he published videos. He published them every day, I think multiple times a day. Back then, this was like early 2000s, or whenever YouTube was a thing, like became a thing. He did it for over a year, and nobody watched. But I think what is really good about this is when people did start watching, they had like a whole backlog of content that they got to interact with and look through. And he had this like big bank of content, which was pretty cool, but he kept doing it despite nobody watching. And then another example he uses is the LeBron James one. And he says how people like to say for LeBron James that he was so successful and so young at such an early age. But the thing is, he played basketball for 15 years before he did. And so nobody asks to see those 15 years. Everyone is like, oh, look at him. He's good and young and successful. And then the final one is, it was all already said. I hope you won't mind. My husband is in the room. We spoke this morning, and he said, I sometimes look at things that other people have written, and I feel like I shouldn't write it because it's already written, but then I realize I know more than them. And that's a whole thing. Like, we just feel like things have been done and said, and why would we do the same? But here's my take on it. Think about musicians, filmmakers, whoever who creates things regularly. Imagine if Taylor Swift just said like, oh no, pop has been done. Like, I have nothing else to say. Or if Martin Scorsese, who has like 25 movies, said, oh no, all the movies that could have been done have been done. And so they wouldn't create. And we literally, and I swear, I promise, we wouldn't know of these people. Like, imagine if Taylor just gave up after the first album. And so they still keep releasing it. Everyone does. Like, there's so many musicians who still do all of the genres despite there being so much music on all of those genres. If it hasn't been said by you, it hasn't been said. This is so cheesy, but it's so true. You have a unique voice that you can use, so please do. And then real quick, this is like my final few minutes, really. The only steps you need to get started. You need a couple minutes to set up your platform. I say this because I know you all know how to set up a platform. You know, I'm going to say do WordPress. I've been on WordPress my whole life, like for a decade probably. My work, my side projects, my travel blog, everything. And so pick a platform that you like and that you're comfortable with and set it up to a level where you can publish. That's it. You can tweak things later. If you don't want to start there and you want something that is more cool or fancy, like YouTube, Instagram, whatever it is, my take on it is this. Go for it, 100%. But I do recommend you still build a platform alongside of that is the one you own, because you do not own YouTube, you do not own Medium, you do not own anybody other than your blog or website and your email list. And so do something that you can keep to yourself when algorithms change and things happen. 5 to 10 minutes is all you need. You can fix it later. Brainstorm 5 topics. 5 topics is super easy. Remember back to the Google searches. People want to know all sorts of things, so just start there if you are like completely stuck for ideas. If I were to start a running blog again, which wouldn't be as bad as the one that was like 5 years ago, but got me the job, I would do this. I would just type in whatever is related and just look at things that resonate. And so for me, it will be these 5. Starting to run really early, losing weight, running in windy Dublin or rainy Dublin or dark Dublin. It's pretty much all that works. The third one is set up your deadline. I don't want you to feel unencouraged or terrified of your deadlines, but if it's not on the calendar, it's not going to happen. Some days, not a day of the week. And so just set something that works for you but doesn't make you hate the process. And so if you're super busy, if like life is crazy, set it like a month from now. If life is good, if you have space, set it a week from now. Super easy. Like just take the time that you feel is realistic for you right now and just put it in the calendar. I know it sounds like very basic advice, but oftentimes the things that we really like to do, and they're kind of like aspirational things, we're like, oh, I'll do it when I have time, but we never get time, so you have to make it. And then the one final step is that just know the steps you need to take so that then when the time comes when you do want to create, you know actually what you're doing. And so it can be as simple as just having a Google Doc that you can write in. I write in Google Doc because it's easy to collaborate, but you can obviously do whatever. And then moving to WordPress and publishing. Like that, it can be as simple as that. Or you can add a couple more steps if you need to add photos that are your own custom photos, or links, or whatever it is. The important thing here is to not procrastinate on things that may be a little bit like less straightforward. But just take the time and actually do it, and then once you're done, you'll have a thing live in the world. Final, kind of like a reminder on that is, it's just done is better than perfect in a way that you will never be 100% happy with the thing if you just keep tweaking it and just feel like there's always more to add, because you can just keep adding by publishing more, and that's a really cool thing about it. And then the last couple of minutes, I'm very close to the end, and so tip number one for just keeping going when things aren't like as easy is to make it a habit, because I think when things are habits, they kind of become a part of our routine rather than just like a random thing that we do whenever we have time or energy for. And so daily or weekly works really well if that works for you, obviously. But whatever works for you is fine. Just make it a recurring thing. These are some of my suggestions. It can be 15 minutes every morning. This is actually really cool because you feel really empowered once you have created something in the morning. Like, that's so great. You can do it weekly on a weekend or every 2 weeks. I just want to encourage you to show up rather than have these like crazy goals. Like if you say, I'm going to write 100 words every week, that's a lot better than saying I'm going to write 4,000 words whenever I have time, because you're not going to do the 4,000. But if you write 100 words every week, multiply that by 52, and you're going to have a lot more words than if you hadn't done any of it. And then tip number 2 is to not run out of content ideas. This is kind of like the one that gets people stuck, I think. And these are tips from another good friend of mine, a freelance writer, who basically said, work from whatever you already have. Like, you don't always need to create from scratch. Stop consuming if that makes you compare yourself to a lot of other people's ideas. I think that's a big one, because if we have more ideas of other people than our own, it's really hard to feel creative and feel like we have something to bring to the table. And then ask questions to your audience, because they're gonna wanna contribute and be part of your process as well. And then, of course, if you feel inspired, create more and create in advance, and then embrace that, just like be okay with taking a break. I think that's really important as well, because our creative muscles, I think, do need to get a break as well, and that's totally okay. And then we have tip number 3, which is to read. I know this is contrary to what I just said, to stop consuming if it makes you feel crap. But basically, I don't want you to compare yourself to others. What I want you to do is to imagine how many ideas, like genius ideas of the world, are out there and that you can use to get inspired. And so look, I just want to take a quick second and say, imagine if someone said, I want to be a rock star. Like, I want to have really good like rock music and put it out in the world. And then you ask them, well, how often do you listen to music? And they said, oh, I never do. Like, I don't care. That wouldn't work. And so this is pretty much the same. Don't compare yourself to others, but look at all of these like incredible ideas that humans have created, and look at how they use sentences and sentence structures and the ways they tell stories. And you can look at other industries. You can read fiction. It doesn't matter, just as long as you get to read people's words that make you feel good about just creating. It's pretty cool. Tip number 4 is to switch up your styles and formats and platforms if that makes you feel better about things. Like, things can get boring, and I'm not saying boring is bad. I think that sometimes if we feel bored and we don't use it as, a place to just kind of let our mind wander, then I think it is good to just find something that is going to give us a little bit of a shiny object moment, because then we get our gears rolling in a different way. And so here's a really cool example. This is Jay Akunzo. That's his Instagram right there. He is a podcaster and an author, and he basically he publishes almost every day, I think, on his blog, but he takes his blog posts, I think he shortens them, I'm not sure, but he basically puts them into these Instagram carousels, which you can just like swipe through, which I think is really cool, because not only does he get to publish elsewhere the content that he's already created, not even like from scratch, but he also reaches a new audience, which I think is great, because some people that are on Instagram maybe wouldn't ever think to go to his blog, and so he kind of puts more of his work out there to new people. These are the 6 books that I recommend for writing and creativity advice. Not all of them. Like, if you read all of them, it's going to be very overwhelming, so don't do that. But I think they're really good. The top 2 are just general writing. That one is online writing. And then the bottom 3 are kind of a mix of marketing and creativity. Whether you are a marketer or not, it's going to be helpful, I think. And I just want to remind you that I've given you the why, the excuses, the inspiring people, but you already have everything you need. Like, you have your phones and laptops, and you have your amazing brains. And so I just want you to remind you that you are the one that gets to choose to make an impact on the internet, because we just have it freely available. Well, not freely, but we have it available to us. And we get to do so many great things. Thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate it so much. Thank you. Also this.
Thank you very much for your talk. It was awesome. It was very supportive to every writer, I think, in this room. I have one question from Slido for you.
Perfect.
From Paul, who is asking, what are the differences or maybe things to consider when you're creating content as yourself versus as a company?
Paul, are you here? Cool. So I run my own business under my name, so I might be a little bit biased. But I believe it's so valuable that every one of you as individuals create content for yourself first. Like, if you have a company, like you run your own company, do that too. But that's a whole different thing, where you get to, I think, you would have to go into it a bit more strategically, just so that you don't waste resources. Because if you hire people to write for you, then you want them to write things that are going to attract like ideal customers to you. But if you're an individual who just wants to create their own platform, podcasting, writing, whatever it is, I think it's really valuable to do it from your own name. You can have something that is attached to the name, like if you run a podcast and have like a name of the podcast by Paul. But I think it's good that if someone were to meet you in a month from now at an event and types in your name into Google or Twitter or whatever, they can find a backlog of things that you have created and really resonate with that, or just run into it because someone else shared it. I think that there's a lot of power behind creating with your own name. So I would recommend to do that. And I just want to say, I have my own, I work as Marijana Kay with software companies on content marketing, but I do have a separate platform to that I just use for, like, this is how I've approached my productivity experiments. Like, because I work for myself, and so I have to kind of like test out how I use my time. And then I just use that as something that I don't expect any money from or any like big things, but I believe that if there's someone else who's self-employed, and maybe they're a mom or whatever, like they're like in a specific case, and they find something that I've said about productivity, being home alone, like working for myself, maybe they're going to resonate with that, and that means I've made an impact, and that's really important to me. And so I really recommend to have that platform on the side. Does that help? Cool, perfect.
Okay, I have one more question. If you get stuck yourself, what is your you mentioned some productivity hacks, so maybe if you can share some tips, what do you do? Maybe some little things.
Honestly, like here's the thing. I think internet, like everything I said, I deeply believe in, but I think internet has also created this expectation of people who do create regularly to always be upbeat, especially YouTubers. I know that's a big deal because they're really young and really famous really early. People expect them to be like, show up every day on camera and be happy and, inspiring or whatever. I don't think that's realistic. And so I believe that if we feel like we're uninspired, and if maybe we don't want to, like, I think taking a break is a big deal, okay? Like, that's, if you just don't want to sit down and write and you're just, I hate this, it's the worst. I feel almost fatigued to do it, take a break. Don't do anything for weeks, like, in regards to that, and coming back will be a lot more refreshing. But if you want to create and you just feel so down, I almost encourage sharing that. Not in, like, a way to just, like, bring everyone else down, but I think there's a lot of power in, especially in tech in the last couple of years, there have been a lot of people sharing their, CEOs and founders and things like that, sharing their struggles with mental health and with pressures of running a business and, even struggles with their families and, maybe illnesses and things they've just gone through. And I'm not saying that anyone, you should never, ever, ever cross boundaries that you've set for yourself. So if you don't want to talk about whatever issues you have, that's fine. But I think there's a lot of people, I think, see it as much as resonating as it could be when you show up and you say, you know what, today really sucked because I don't know how I'm going to get my employees paid, or I don't know how I'm going to push through another week of work because I've been sick for a week, or what. Like, it's, people see that you're not just this perfect picture that you've painted. I'm not saying that you should, but I think oftentimes it's just good to be candid and to show up that you show that you are made out of, flesh and bones, and you hurt and you go through struggles, and maybe there are times when you don't want to work, and times when people expect you to be this, like, great founder or motivational speaker or whatever, and then you're just like, you know what, I just this sucks because I've struggled with this for however long, and then that creates a whole new, like, snowball of people who are open to sharing their struggles. And so that's the impact again, you know what I mean? It's just, even if it feels like it's not really your place right now, if you don't want to take a break, then maybe you can try being candid to the extent of what you're comfortable with sharing. Of course, if you want to keep your private life private, that's fine, but I think it's a really powerful thing to do.
Great. I have a question from audience. Anyone? Okay. Can I get help to get the microphone to the... Great.
Greetings. Hey.
Hello.
Great talk. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I do have a bit of a personal question.
That's okay.
What do you say to someone that feels it's too late to start?
My husband is another one of those. I mean, that kind of falls into the it's already been said, and what do I have to add to the table when everyone else has been doing it? But can you imagine? I know I've said this exact example, and I'm probably, like, annoying. But if Taylor Swift looked at everyone who won pop awards for over the last year and said, well, everyone has done that, so how do I go in and do it? So it's you. You are the only person that can create things that you are creating. There's no one else can copy it. No one else can share your perspective on things. Can I get just, I want to ask him something. Yeah, I think the microphone's coming, though. So what do you do? What is your job? Or what do you want to share about if you were to write?
I'm actually by training a teacher, but I now work as a content editor.
Okay, cool.
Oddly enough, we do tour guides, and so that's a very specific thing. But
okay.
Occasionally we have to write blog posts, and I'm shit scared.
So, I mean, if you look at all the tour guides that already exist, do you ever see any one of them that really stand out to you, where you're like, oh, look, like, this is such a new approach, or this is a very special way that someone has done it that no one else could? Like, that, did that ever happen to you? Or in any other industry, it doesn't have to be your own. Like, if
I could definitely think of some examples. There are people that do it with a twist. They're funny, maybe they're very quirky. And
yeah. And so I think first of all, it hasn't already been said, because if you have your own way of guiding people through a new city or a country or whatever, whatever the tour guide is on, if you have your own way of doing that in real life, that means you have your own way of writing about that. And, like, how do you want to make those people feel? And what do you want them to walk away with? And how do you, what do you want to spark in them? Like, is there a way that you could write about it that's going to inspire people to actually visit that area, whereas other guides are just, like, really dry or just kind of, like, standard. Like if there's something where you can add your own, like why you would want someone to read that and put yourself in their shoes, I think that adds a lot to it. And of course, like a lot of the times we want to create things and then we'll look at Google and we're like, well, there's 70 million billion results and like, how can I stand out? But that's not the only way to stand out. You can take that and take them into like smaller, not smaller platforms, but smaller formats. You can do it on Instagram. You can do it on like Twitter, Facebook, whatever. You can do live videos. You can do things that other people haven't and reach one person at a time. And then, as I said earlier, those people are going to help you kind of like spread the word and share that, because they're going to be like, there's this quote, I really wish I knew where it was from, but you want to create content that makes the husband of the family like throw his newspaper on the table and yell at his wife being like, have you seen this? It's so good. Like you want people to just feel that thing, like I have to show this to my family or to my friends or colleagues or whatever. And so I think just going from the perspective of what you want them to feel, not just what you think should be out there, but how you think that you can contribute and make a difference for that one person. Just remember one person. You don't need to reach 1 million. Start with one, and then you can take it from there. And then when you see that someone is reading your stuff or sharing it, like just one person, you message them and you're like, hey, what did you really like about this? What do you think we can do better? And then you start building this conversation, and you do that with first 5 people who read your stuff. All of a sudden, you have this insane amount of knowledge and insight that you can use to further, improve your story. And then those people are going to feel like a part of that story. And so they're going to want to help you. I think it's kind of like a snowball thing.
Convinced.
Does that help?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Any more questions? Okay, I will have just one more.
Of course.
What are your personal favorites to get inspired by? Do you have any Twitter accounts or maybe Instagrams that you follow and never let you down with the inspiration?
The few that I've, like the ones that you've seen, they're kind of like, not random. One of them is the Minimalists, which is just 2 guys who talk about minimalism. I think that's really cool because they're minimalist. They don't want to create content that is like flooding and cluttering your content, like your feed. So they do it in a really interesting way. I usually just look at founders and people who have been kind of in my line of business who came from not really having a lot. And I don't really mean that by just money or, privilege. I mean that they started, literally, they had no platform. Nobody knew who they were. And so I mentioned Arlan Hamilton, who is one of the VCs in US. And then I just follow, like I'm a productivity video junkie. Like I like watching them because they make me feel good. That's what it is. But because there's a mix of, I like watching them for tips, but then I also like watching them because they're so consistent with showing up, weekly with like productivity tips. And so there are, like one of the YouTube channels is Amy Landino, she went from, and actually this is a really interesting thing. She went from talking about video marketing, like that was her thing for years and years and years on YouTube, and switched to talking about productivity and going after the life you want. Like that's her whole tagline. And so that's a really kind of interesting way to look at how someone has literally repositioned herself on the internet, made a business out of it twice. So yeah, I like watching her videos and looking at like stories from people who show up on, like Instagram stories from people who show up on YouTube. And so it's interesting to kind of see mixes of things. So those are a few that I really like. And it just, honestly, it's just about, I unfollow everyone who doesn't like inspire me or makes me feel good. And I kind of clean my feeds every couple of, like maybe like once a quarter. I just go in and look at what has been showing up and what it just makes me feel a little bit bland and a little bit dull. And so I look for things that are where people show up with their genuine, authentic selves. That just makes me feel like, oh yeah, like this is a good way to start the day. So let me just try that kind of thing.
Does it mean when you clean your feeds, does it mean that you control your input?
Do you mean I control what I put out?
No. You consciously consume.
Yeah, I try to, because I know myself and I know that I can get very distracted. Like if I have Twitter and Instagram regularly on my phone, they become a habit, like a force of habit where I'll be sitting at my desk and writing because that's my job. And then I will get like, not distracted, but maybe I will feel a bit uncomfortable because something is a bit hard and I struggle to find the right piece of information. And my phone is right there and I just grab it and I open Twitter. I don't even know how I opened it. Like it just happened by it's an automatic process. And so I have started to either delete Twitter at times from my phone or log out. And just other times I've just tried to notice that, okay, now I've been on Twitter for an hour, and so I should stop. I have the thing on iPhone that warns you that you've been on it for an hour, and so that kind of helps. I think I have better and worse times. Like if I feel really inspired and positive, and my work has been like a good driver of my kind of like energy, then I don't need that. But then whenever I'm kind of like on the lower end of that spectrum, then Twitter and Instagram are kind of my escape, and I don't think it's good. I think it kind of like fills my head with other people's ideas, and that's what I mentioned. And so at that point, I know it's unhealthy, and so I had to kind of like I have to step back. So it varies, it goes back and forth, but I think everyone is always on that spectrum somewhere. So I think it's just good to recognize that more so than set up like strict limits and like never cross them. I think it's important to understand what's going on as well, like behind that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.